You've been intentionally misled and misdirected. You've been sent down the wrong road. And in comparative and proportional terms, we are exactly where we were as black folk in this country. We're exactly where we were in 1860 on the eve of the Civil War. You have not moved not one iota in 140 years. And people are shucking and jiving. What you're doing is enjoying the fruits of the social illusion by them telling you somehow that because you have social integration and civil rights that you have achieved something. We as black folk have achieved absolutely nothing with civil rights and integration. Any black person who got more than a third grade education should know that you had more. You had more before integration started than you got today. You've gone backwards. Now let me give you an example, and I say it comparatively speaking in 1860. On 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, in this country, you only had about 287,000 black people that were free out of almost 4.5 million. The other 4.5 million were enslaved all over America. Only 287,000 were free. And yet, out of those 287,000 black people, they had succeeded in acquiring one half of this nation's wealth. 1/2 of 1% of the nation's wealth. With only 287,000 free. Now here we are, 140 years later, in the richest nation on earth. 140 years later, you still own and control 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. And contrary to what people keep telling you through a lot of civil rights leaders, civil rights and integration does not decide equal opportunity for you. You cannot get equality through civil rights and integration. What decides your opportunities in America is what you own and control. That's what decides your opportunities. You can have all the civil rights you want. You cannot go into an expensive restaurant or an expensive hotel if you don't have any money. They're playing games with you. You must own and control. And what they fail to tell you is that the whole process of slavery and Jim Crow segregation did not happen to black folk by accident. That wasn't any big accident. For you to wind up being enslaved for over 500 years in this country and 1,300 years around the world, that wasn't an accident. It happened intentionally. What your leaders should be asking is, why did it happen to you? Why were black folk enslaved all those centuries? For what? There must have been a purpose. If the purpose was strictly to maldistribute and misdistribute almost 100% or 99.5% of all this nation's wealth, power, resource, privileges, businesses, and income, and controls of all levels of government. That was the purpose of slavery and Jim Crow segregation. So one group of people could live a very advantaged lifestyle, and these over here who are black would have nothing. That was the purpose of slavery and Jim Crow segregation. Now here you're talking about civil rights and integration. When did you correct it? If the other group controls 99.5% of everything and you control nothing, where is your equal opportunity? Where is your equality? Why are you sending black kids to school every day and people telling them that you're in an equalized society, a colorblind society, and you got nothing? You own and control nothing. I can come in this city right now and drive around. I'll bet you right now I can't find 2 blacks in this city that owns more than a 3-story building. Everything in this city that's high-rise belongs to whites. You don't own any bridges. You don't own any in the tollways. You don't own any airplanes. You don't own any boats. You don't own any skyscrapers. You don't own the media. You don't own the banks of any consequence. You own nothing. You don't produce anything. You wear clothes, but you don't produce any of any consequence. Or you wear eyeglasses, you don't produce any eyeglasses. You don't own any hospitals. We own nothing. and just as happy as we want to be. Go watch TV. Every black you see has been put into a safe category. The social illusion that's being created for you to dissuade you from doing something to save yourselves, they put a social illusion on TV with safe blacks. The images that are put in front of you show you that those are safe blacks. Any black that's successful in America has some kind of an illicit relationship with a ball. He's either running with a football, baseball, basketball, tennis ball, golf ball, standing on the stage telling jokes, dancing, singing, pretending he's having a ball. They even got a program now on TV called The Ballers. Because see, white folks know you're safe if you've got a relationship with a ball going. Because there's about that much distance between a cotton field and an athletic field. In the athletic field, you were chasing cotton balls. Now you're chasing basketball and tennis balls. You haven't moved one iota. The same person on the cotton fields now on the basketball teams and the football teams. We're not moving. 1/2 or 1% of the nation's wealth. That's what slavery did to you. It maldistributed everything in the hands of the dominant white society. And as an example, you didn't acquire any wealth since 1860. Let me show you some other indications. In 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, almost 99% of all the black people in America, slave and free, was working for whites. Either in a white corporation, in a white business, in some white office, making wealth comfort for whites, on a plantation or whatever it is. We're not moving. 1/2 or 1% of the nation's wealth. That's what slavery did to you. It maldistributed everything in the hands of the dominant white society. And as an example, you didn't acquire any wealth since 1860. Let me show you some other indications. In 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, almost 99% of all the black people in America, slave and free, was working for whites. Either in a white corporation, in a white business, in some white office, making wealth comfort for whites, on a plantation or whatever it is. Here you are, 140 years later, and again, 98% of all the black people in America work for whites. They either work in some level of government, white businesses, city government, state government, school teaching. Only 2% of all the blacks in America work in their own communities for themselves. Only 2% work for themselves. You haven't changed in 140 years. Let me try it another way if you still don't understand my point. On the eve of the Civil War in 1860, again, at that time, go and look at all the prisons in the United States and examine their records. I found out in the records, when I looked at in the prisons in Savannah, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, New York, Washington, D.C., looked at all the prisons, and I found out at that time, even though only 287,000 blacks were free, blacks made up over 51% of all the prisoners. You weren't even free and you made up 51% of the prisoners. Now I look around 140 years later, today, and I still find black folk make up over 51% of all the prisoners. Where have you changed? You don't own anything. You're still in prison. Still work for other people. You're enjoying a social illusion.